break free. You do not have to be tied to any particular course of action. You don't have to be tied to any group of people, to any plan, to any history. You can be free. That is the message of this weekend. My name is Archie Dunlop. This is Talking Astrology with Archie, and it is the weekend of July the 18th and 19th, 2026. In this video, I will be looking at the main events astrologically taking place over the course of a weekend. I will be putting a lot of focus on a trine between Uranus and Pluto. In fact, it's a grand trine because the moon is trine Uranus, it's trine Pluto, and everything comes together in a rather amazing formation. In fact, technically it is an Air Grand Trine. And, having looked at the overall picture, I'll be doing my forecasts for the 12 signs, and I'll be completing this video with an I Ching reading. So let's start off by looking at the chart for the weekend. It is set for midnight on Sunday the 19th, so this is the chart for the very middle of the weekend. So looking at this chart, we can see that the moon is at 29 degrees 29 Virgo, I think, and this chart, by the way, is set for New York. So in the middle of a weekend, midnight on Saturday, moon in very late Virgo. So what this means is that this weekend can, broadly speaking, be divided into two parts. The first part, Saturday, is moon in Virgo. The last part is going to be sort of moon in Libra. So I think that in many respects, Saturday is going to be a continuation of Friday. So on Friday, the moon was in Virgo, also in Virgo for most of Saturday, perhaps even sort of all of Saturday. And so, we can say the usual stuff about moon in Virgo. Moon in Virgo, it's in an earth sign. There is an attention to detail there. But this moon in Virgo, it is in mutual reception to Mercury. Mercury is in Cancer, the sign of the moon. The moon is in Virgo, the sign of Mercury. So this moon Mercury mutual reception does create a situation where our minds are on good form. We can make the most of our brains and our intellect, and we can just understand what is going on pretty well. And if we want to analyze things with this moon trine Mercury, with this mutual reception, then we certainly can. And yes, talking about moon and Mercury, the moon makes sextiles on Saturday to the Sun and Mercury. So beginning of a weekend, moon sextile Mercury, and then moves on, makes a sextile to the Sun. Now that moon sextile Mercury, which a weekend starts with, that is a really good aspect, because we've got these two planets, the moon and Mercury, which are both about the mind. Okay, the moon is more about the sort of emotional mind. Mercury is more about the sort of intellectual and cognitive mind. And the moon and Mercury are in mutual reception. And so that really emphasizes what I was saying. It is a day, Saturday, when we're on good form, intellectually and also verbally as well. So if we've got something to say, something to write, something to communicate, I think we can really do a good job, even though Mercury is retrograde. I think Mercury retrograde, people are very negative about Mercury retrograde, saying, you can't do anything while Mercury is retrograde. Well, that's not necessarily true. And right now, I would have said that Mercury on balance is in a pretty good position. And in retrograde, okay, it would be better if it was not retrograde, but I don't think it's necessarily such a big deal. And then the moon is also on Saturday sextile the sun. Moon sextile sun that's another great aspect. Sun and the moon, the most important planets in the sky. Of course, technically neither of them are planets, but still, when they're in sextile, it's just very healthy. It's life affirming. Things are coming together, and we're perhaps feeling good about ourselves. Okay, it's not a spectacular aspect. It's not about sort of high drama, but it means that we can get ourselves together. Now, another aspect we've got on Saturday is a trine between Uranus and Pluto. I mean, this is a big deal, this trine between Uranus and Pluto. Uranus and Pluto are sort of outer planets, and they do represent the principle of freedom, of breaking free. Now, we shouldn't necessarily be worried about the precise moment when Uranus and Pluto are in trine. This Uranus Pluto trine is going to hang around for a long time. Uranus and Pluto go retrograde, they go direct, and so forth. So it does say something about the times in which we're living. Now I'm going to talk about Uranus and Pluto, by the way, in much greater detail in a minute. But first of all, let me just turn to Sunday. So the moon is moving through late Virgo on Saturday, and then it does change sign. And when the moon changes sign, it makes aspects to a lot of outer planets. It aspects Jupiter, Neptune, Uranus, Pluto. And so these aspects are certainly exciting. And in fact, Uranus aspect, because the moon aspects both Uranus and Pluto, it makes a grand trine in air signs. So that is a feature of Sunday. So things are really coming together. Things are really, really moving, and this is something that I really want to get into, this grand trine. And when I go through the 12 signs, I'll be going into some detail about what it means for each of them. And it's not just about that grand trine. The moon is making a sextile to Jupiter on Sunday. So moon sextile Jupiter is another good aspect. Moon in Libra, sextile Jupiter in Leo. Jupiter is a fortunate planet. So whenever you've got a moon sextile Jupiter, things do work well. We have, all things being equal, more than our fair share of luck. And we additionally, moon opposition Neptune. And moon opposition Neptune, this is part of a wider formation, which I'll be discussing in a minute. It's a kite. But, when you've got moon opposition Neptune, okay, there can be moments of confusion when things may not be entirely clear. But it's not necessarily anything to worry about, but just because we feel something doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. And then right at the end of a weekend, we have got a sextile between Mars and Saturn. Now, that Mars-Saturn sextile, you've got Mars in Gemini, sextile Saturn in Aries, is a rather different energy. And it's quite a disciplined aspect. When you think about Mars and Saturn, you think, oh, that's quite frustrating as well. But it's a sextile. And with this Mars sextile Saturn, I'm hopeful that it can allow us to get ourselves together. We've got all the excitement of this grand trine in air signs, but there can be a certain lack of discipline with grand trines. And maybe this Mars sextile Saturn can allow us to just realize that we've got to get ourselves together. If things are really good, we're just going to lose it because we don't have a focus. And maybe that Mars sextile Saturn could provide some focus. Okay, there is another side to Mars sextile Saturn. You might say, well, it might be a sextile, but does it matter what aspect it is? Mars and Saturn can be a frustrating pair, and I'm hoping that on a personal level, we can avoid the frustrations of Mars sextile Saturn. And if we do feel frustrated, then perhaps through hard work, we can get through them. And our Mars sextile Saturn, on a global level, might work in a very different way. That might be more problematic, more unfortunate, more connected with death and destruction. But personally, I don't think that we need to worry too much about that aspect. Now, before I look at the Grand Trine in detail, I just want to look at this chart set for Sydney, Australia. So here is as a representative of Australasia and East Asia. So if we set the chart for midnight on Sunday, the moon is at 21 degrees Virgo. So that tells us that if you are in Australia or New Zealand, not only is the moon moving through Virgo throughout Saturday, but it's moving through Virgo through the first part of Sunday as well, and it's not going to be until probably Sunday afternoon that the moon moves into Virgo. So a lot of what I say, certainly about the Grand Trine involving Moon, Jupiter, and Moon, Uranus, and Pluto, it won't take place until right at the end of the weekend. And then there is the heliocentric picture. So if we put the Sun at the center of the solar system, and we've got this Jupiter-Pluto opposition still. So this Jupiter-Pluto opposition has been around for a long time. It's a heliocentric Jupiter-Pluto opposition, and we're about to get a geocentric Jupiter-Pluto opposition. So that tells us that it's still very much a thing, something that we should be thinking about. And look at the Earth. The Earth is at 26 degrees Capricorn. So in about 10 days' time, the Earth will make a conjunction to Pluto and an opposition to Jupiter. So this Uranus-Pluto opposition is about to be Jupiter-Pluto opposition is really about to be triggered by the Earth, and it's actually just been triggered by Mercury. So I think there is a real sort of Uranus-Pluto feel to the times in which we're living, whether you look at geocentric, heliocentric, and with Jupiter-Pluto. I've got a Jupiter-Pluto opposition in my chart, and was never quite satisfied. One thinks one could always do things better, and maybe that's how you feel. Maybe that's how we feel. And additionally, the Earth is now getting quite close to that square to Chiron, and Earth square Chiron. Hopefully that means that we're not going to be feeling sorry for ourselves. Hopefully we're not going to be licking our wounds, and instead we can be finding ways to be the maverick, to do things differently, not just for the sake of it, but because we have to, because we want to really move things along. And if other people are complacent, well, we can be the ones to break them out of their complacency. And now I want to turn to the Grand Trine and the fact that there is a Grand Trine, and it's not just about the Grand Trine, it's about this Uranus-Pluto trine that we've got. So here is a chart for the moment in which the moon is on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. This is as close as I think one can get to the Grand Trine. So this formation, London time, takes place 2:13 p.m. On Sunday, and so that would be sort of 9:13 a.m. New York time. Don't worry necessarily too much about the exact time, although you could say that if you're looking for events around this Grand Trine, then probably this time on Sunday would 2:15 p.m. London time, 9:13 a.m. New York time would be something to look for. But so as far as the Uranus-Pluto is concerned, there is this question of what is it about? And if you think about Uranus and Pluto, it's about the desire for freedom. That's surely how we can be looking for it. Uranus wants change. Uranus is not happy with the status quo. Particularly Uranus in Gemini. Uranus in Gemini absolutely is looking for variety, and wants to move to something new. And Uranus in Gemini can get bored, but Pluto is saying, enough of this. This whole thing has to be overthrown. In fact, Uranus and Pluto are both planets which relate to overthrowing things, disrupting the status quo. And so, with this weekend, with Uranus and Pluto in trine, and it is not a just something that's just going to take place over the weekend. Okay, technically Uranus and Pluto are exactly in trine on Saturday at I think 5:45 a.m. London time. So waiting for 5:45 a.m. it arrives, it goes, nothing happens, you're done with a Uranus-Pluto trine. It doesn't work like that. This Uranus-Pluto trine is going to be around all year into next year. It is a major event, and it's saying something about society and how people feel, and people are just not happy with the way things are. Now, the thing about the Grand Trine is that the moon, when it moves into Libra, is just picking up on everything, and the fact that you've got an Air Grand Trine means that Saturday, it's Sunday. On Sunday, when the moon is in Libra, that Uranus-Pluto trine, which is quite a heavy sort of collective influence, is available to us. And, you might want to sort of meditate at the time of this 2:13 p.m. London time. You can work out the time zones, but whenever it might be exact. So that would be 3:13 p.m. in Paris on Sunday. So whenever it is, if you just want to get an idea about what the Uranus-Pluto trine is all about for you, maybe you should just stop and pause and wait, and that's the time when it is exactly on the midpoint, and it is powerful. It's a very, very powerful moment, at least on a sort of a spiritual and inspirational level. And this trine, we can see it in different ways, and there's something really powerful about it which comes out when you actually look at the ninth harmonic. So the ninth harmonic is a harmonic which is connected with bliss. We are looking for bliss. It's a very spiritual number in a sort of a harmonic sense. I'm not really into numerology, but the nineness of this horoscope is about the search for bliss, for something about wanting to go beyond ourselves. That's what the ninth harmonic can be about. And if we look at the ninth harmonic, remember the calculation of the ninth harmonic, we convert all the planets to absolute longitude, multiply by 9, and then subtract 360 until we get to a number below 360, and then convert back into signs and into degrees and signs. So if we calculate the ninth harmonic of this chart, so here is the ninth harmonic, and when we do the ninth harmonic, it's really very powerful, because we've got Pluto, Moon, and Uranus, all coming together, all at 10 degrees Scorpio on the ninth harmonic chart, and this is opposition Jupiter and Neptune. So Jupiter and Neptune are making a conjunction on the ninth harmonic, and Moon, Uranus, and Pluto are also making a conjunction. Those two conjunctions are opposition one another, and additionally Mars and Saturn are involved. So there is a really amazing grand cross on the ninth harmonic, and So this ninth harmonic, what is it? I mean, it is, it's the quest for bliss and for transcendence and to move beyond everyday selves, which, on a personal level, that's great, isn't it? I mean, and so if you stop what you're doing at 2:13 p.m. London time, or whatever the equivalent is in local time, you may be able to really get a glimpse of what all of these planets mean. I mean, when we've got 7 planets coming together in this ninth harmonic grand cross, that certainly seems to me important. My worry would be that the ninth harmonic on a personal level might be about the quest for unity, for bliss, for feeling, for comfort. But what about on a collective level? What about on the level of politicians, power groups, military alliances, Iran, Ukraine? How people like Trump and Zelensky and Putin and whatever, how they are behaving? What does bliss mean to them? How are they trying to find bliss? And so I think there's a possibility that on a geopolitical level, that the concept of bliss might be completely twisted, and people are looking for something which it's a fantasy, but in the attempt to find that fantasy, something very disturbing could unfold. So I think that we should really try to look at it from a personal level, not get too worried about the collective and political side of things, but inevitably that is something I am going to have to talk about. And so we can see this Uranus-Pluto trine as part of a wider cycle. So we've got the trine now. And when did this cycle start? When did Uranus and Pluto make a conjunction? Well, the Uranus-Pluto conjunction, the last Uranus-Pluto conjunction, when this whole Uranus-Pluto cycle started, was a long time ago. It was on June the 30th, 1966. And June the 30th, 1966, you can see there was Uranus and Pluto were at 16 degrees 6 Virgo, and this is a very long cycle, and so now Uranus has moved on, and it's making the waxing trine. So if you think about it, Pluto is in Aquarius. Uranus has moved on. It's now not making a conjunction anymore, but it's a trine. And so if we take it, and if we kind of regard the lunar cycle as being our model, then this is still a waxing. It's like a waxing moon, a waxing trine between Uranus and Pluto. So this is the beginning of it all. And so I was sort of thinking about the 60s, and the trouble about the 60s is that when we look at the 60s, we often look at the 60s in terms of the West, and I don't know, the liberation of the 60s and progressiveness, but that's not necessarily how it was experienced in all parts of the world. So there is a Western bias to the 60s. But if you think about the 60s, I don't have to tell you what the 60s are all about. Freedom, people expressing their freedom. There's suddenly being apparently opportunities all over the place. And Virgo is a sign which is connected with the body, and it might well be that one associates Virgo and Pluto in Virgo with, for example, reproductive rights. And I know that in the United States, obviously Roe versus Wade was the early 1970s, but if you look at abortion from a UK perspective, I believe abortion became legal in Britain in 1967, which would have been a year after it. So you could say, yeah, Virgo could be the body, and radical changes in the fact that the body can be changed, its cycles can be changed, and I think that is a feeling of how Pluto in Virgo might work. Maybe even people who have Pluto in Virgo. So that's one aspect of Uranus conjunct Pluto, and all of these possibilities. Some might be good and others might be bad. And so when we look at Uranus trine Pluto, perhaps we have to go back to the 1960s and say that some of the forces unleashed in 1966, around then, the mid-1960s, are really now starting to make themselves felt. And that's kind of difficult. It's difficult to imagine, because it's difficult to think in terms of 60 years, because it is such a long time. By the way, one might have thought that England was going to win the World Cup. I mean, Uranus Pluto was around England won the World Cup with a Uranus Pluto conjunction, and you would have thought that 2026 with Uranus Pluto trine, it would have been a great time for England to win the World Cup. Fortunately, I didn't make any predictions about who was going to win the World Cup, because I don't find soccer, football particularly interesting. But there was certainly a connection there, and I can certainly understand why an astrologer might have predicted that England was going to World Cup. As we now know, they were defeated by Argentina in the semi-final, so that just didn't happen. I mean, that's kind of like we get really into these coincidences, like I don't know, France playing Spain on Bastille Day. You think, that's a great day for France to play Spain. France's special day, but no, Spain defeated them. Likewise, it's exactly 60 years since England won the Gold Cup. It didn't make any difference. England still was knocked out by Argentina, so we shouldn't get kind of too caught up by coincidences. But right now with Uranus trine Pluto, I think that people do want their freedom. Maybe the potential of 1966, it's still with us. People want to be free, but now they are aware of what is holding them back. And going back to what I was saying, about, in my introduction, when I talked about, the tarot card, the devil, the fact that you have got this couple chained to the plinth on which the devil is standing, but those chains are weak. It just does look as if they can escape, and maybe this is what Uranus and Pluto are about. We can escape. So if we've got this story that we are constrained, that we can't do anything, that we're just stuck in something forever, perhaps Uranus and Pluto is just encouraging us to break free from this story. We don't have to be tied to it, and we can really be ourselves, and it's up to us to define who we are. And perhaps what is allowing us to break free is also the awareness of everything that is trying to hold us back. And that is, of course, what is happening. I'm thinking in particular of freedom of action, freedom of speech. A lot of European countries are trying to restrict what people can post on social media. That if you're under 16, you can't use social media or whatever it is. And that's not just Europe; it's in sort of Australia. So it's almost like the powers that be are kind of aware of the potential of that Uranus trine Pluto, but they're trying to squelch it. And so there is that battle, but because of the opposition to freedom, those forces that are afraid of freedom, we can actually start to define our freedom as well. And with a trine, one's wondering, how can you really stop people from expressing that freedom? And of course we need to think about the two components of the Uranus Trine Pluto. There is Pluto in Aquarius, and Pluto in Aquarius is such a double-edged sword, isn't it? I mean, Pluto in Aquarius represents a totalitarian state. I mean, Aquarius is a sign which is quite totalitarian, and it's the active part of Saturn, trying to control people, perhaps through technology. But Pluto in Aquarius is also about demanding our freedom. So people want freedom, but the powers that be want to restrict that freedom, and so that. This Uranus Pluto trine seems to be quite a mega struggle, even though it's a trine. And maybe it's easy to pass laws to try to restrict people's freedom of action, but it's also easy to resist. There are so many ways around it. And as far as a past example, I just want to look at one example of Uranus Trine Pluto from the past. And it's something to think about. And here is the chart of the Boston Tea Party. So the Boston Tea Party was one of the precursor events for the American Revolution against Britain. And this took place on December the 16th, 1773. So this was, 2.5 years, is that right? 2.5 years before the Declaration of Independence. And looking at this chart, Uranus is at 25 degrees Taurus, Pluto is at 21 degrees Capricorn, and Neptune is at 20 degrees Virgo. And we've got Saturn there as well. So, the Boston Tea Party, I'm afraid my American history is pretty poor, but it was basically, I think the British colonial authorities tried to dump cheap tea on the American colonies, and there was a boat which was full of tea, and so these colonists who were not happy about it, they boarded this British boat, and they dumped all this tea in Boston Harbor. You probably know more about it than me, but it was an act of rebellion, but it was a precursor to the Revolutionary Wars. And so this might be telling us about what this Uranus-Pluto trine is all about. It's not necessarily like the revolution is happening right this moment. Instead, it's stirring things up. And it may be particularly relevant to the United States, because it was relevant to the United States in the early 1770s. But it's not necessarily about the event itself. It just could be about a prolonged period of aggravation, maybe lasting for a few years, and the actual event may take place after Uranus and Pluto have made their exact aspect. Maybe they'll be a long way apart. Because by the time of the actual Declaration of Independence, it was here it is. You can see the Uranus-Pluto trine had completely fallen away, and so there's Uranus and Pluto. So it was 10 degrees apart, and it was dissociate. So I think that might be how we need to think about it. It's not necessarily going to be something happening straight away. It just may take a bit of time to develop. And now I want to turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of July the 18th and 19th, 2026. Aries. It's perhaps a split weekend, with Saturday and Sunday being quite different days. On Saturday, the moon is moving through Virgo. On Sunday, it's moving through Libra. And, as far as Saturday is concerned, it may be that you are sort of more, down to earth. The moon is moving through an earth sign, and it may feel that there are just things that you cannot avoid. I mean, you might like to avoid them, but it may be a question of duty calling. But, it's nothing to worry about. In fact, we've got a sextile between the moon in Virgo and the sun in Cancer. And, this sextile is quite calming and also rather methodical. You know what exactly needs to be done. I mean, if you're honest with yourself, and you can just go through things, one step at a time, and there's really no need to be distracted. Okay, I know that on Saturday there is a trine between Uranus and Pluto. I mean, that is, I think, quite a dramatic aspect, but I don't think that you're going to necessarily feel its full power until Sunday. And another thing about Saturday is that you need to sort of marshal your resources. You haven't got all the energy in the world, and it might be that on Saturday part of you feels that you're in recovery mode. It just might seem that there are things that you have to get over. And so if you try to do too much, then you might exhaust yourself, and instead you should be perhaps getting as much rest as you can. I mean, not too much rest. As I've already said, on Saturday it does seem that there is a bit of work to be done in your own way. And it's up to you to make the decisions, and ideally, and not feel that you have to be pushed. Now, as you move into Sunday, things do change. I mean, the moon changes sign; it moves into Libra, and the thing about the moon moving into Libra, it is a cardinal sign. And of course, Aries, you have a cardinal sign. Aries is a cardinal sign, and so the sign change is quite motivating. It means that you feel probably more inspired, and that there's more stuff going on, and you perhaps feel that you're not alone, that there are other things to take into consideration, perhaps other people to take into consideration. I mean, that is one way of looking at moon moving into Libra. I mean, when the moon moves into Libra, it's of course moving into your opposite sign. And Libra in the Aries chart is a sign, that is often connected, with relationships, the other person. Okay, it could be about enemies and rivals, but I wouldn't necessarily worry about that too much. Instead, think about the people around you, the people you have to deal with, and don't think that that's necessarily a problem. I mean, it might be on Saturday that certain people could be a bit of a pain. I mean, they might seem a chore, having to relate if you don't really want to, and there are other things you need to do, and you're just not necessarily in the mood. But on Sunday, moon in Libra, that does mean that things can start to move, and additionally, the moon, when it moves into Libra, it makes a trine to Uranus, it makes a trine to Pluto, it makes an opposition to Neptune. In fact, all of the outer planets get activated, and don't forget that Neptune, okay, might be going retrograde, but it is in your sign, and that is something that you might every now and then forget. And Neptune in your sign as I've said on several occasions, I do regard Neptune in your sign as being a pointer. And by pointer, I mean that you have something that you really can do well. And Neptune in Aries, I really think it can be about leadership. I really like to use the Bismarck example. Bismarck, he was sort of Chancellor of Germany, in sort of 1860s, 1870s, and Bismarck was an Aries, and he really came into prominence when Neptune went into Aries. Okay, I know you're not Bismarck, but it just is perhaps a useful role model to think that someone can really be spectacular, he lead his country, and by and large lead his country very well. And so leadership is something that is natural to the average Aries, but we're talking about the kind of leadership which is all about you. It's something very particular to you. And with the moon opposition Neptune, and Neptune is close to a sextile of Pluto and sextile of Uranus, this moon opposition might highlight it all. Even if that moon opposition Neptune is not exact, it's you've got the moon at least very least in early Libra, with Neptune in early Libra, so it might give you a glimpse of what you could do. And if we're talking about leadership, we're talking about other people. I mean, leaders need followers. You can certainly set a good example at the very least. And with Moon in Libra, do think about other people, and the fact that we've got this Grand Trine, and Grand Trine is it's really very energetic. And Moon in Libra, it's in a sign, but it's not just about relationships. Libra, arguably, in the Aries chart, is the sign that you are least aware of, least conscious of, and there just may be something going on behind the scenes that you're not entirely familiar with, that you don't logically understand, but it's very real. I mean, it could be appearing, through dreams, for example, or even it could be daydreams. Just the way the unconscious starts to have an impression on the conscious, and deep down, you know that things are happening, and that you do have a role. And when we think about Uranus and Pluto, as I suggest in the thumbnail of this video, it is about freedom, and you being able to find the freedom to really be yourself. So it's an aspect that it might be challenging. I mean, trines, the grand trines, things move quickly, and perhaps that's a challenge. And it might well be that certain people are a reflection of what is going on in the cosmos. So maybe the cosmos doesn't speak to you directly; it speaks to you through the people you encounter. So look at their behavior, look at what they say to you. Even if they say things or do things which they don't really understand, they might say something by mistake, do something even by mistake. But it's all about a message, and that message is coming to you. And I think, Aries, you can really develop a good understanding of what exactly that message is, and this might encourage you to, in the end, just feel you have to do something or say something, and it could surprise you, could surprise everyone. And so I think that it is really a powerful time for you. Now, right at the end of the weekend, we have a sextile between Mars and Saturn. So this Mars sextile Saturn it's an aspect that is probably fortunate, but not necessarily. So, there are two ways of seeing Mars sextile Saturn. Now, you could see it as just being a contact between Mars and Saturn. Forget the idea that it's a sextile. And so, in that sense, Saturn could, I'm not saying it will, but it just could be holding you up. There's something you want to do, there's something you want to say, somewhere you want to go to, and something is in your way. But the question is, what is in your way? Well, Saturn is in Aries, and it could be that you yourself are in your own way. And that might mean that, you have a judgment which is better than your own judgment. Sorry, that sounds a bit schizoid, but of course people work on different levels. You work on different levels, and it's not just about doing the first thing that comes to mind. Saturn is creating structure, and you have to think very carefully about what you're going to do by the end of a weekend. And just doing something for the sake of it, well, that's not quite good enough. But if you are very focused on Sunday, and perhaps as you move into the new week, if you are focused, you are disciplined, and you're very careful what you say. You don't do things which are kind of irrelevant or extraneous. That can be hard work, because Mars is in Gemini, and so with Mars in Gemini, it's possible that Aries wants to go all over the place, wants to give itself at least two different choices. But no, there is just one thing that you really ideally should be concentrating on, and we're talking about maybe the energy of the universe, and being able to harness that energy and making the absolute best of whatever is available. And I do think that quite a lot is available. And I should also say, Aries, that don't forget the simple matter of relationships. The fact that the moon is in your opposite sign, and you don't necessarily have to do everything yourself, and you don't have to be the one who is entirely responsible for creating inspiration and for creating action. I think that another person's input, okay, it might be the right person's input, can be very invigorating, and it might be that the missing ingredient actually is another person. And so this is it's particularly about Sunday rather than Saturday. As I said at the beginning of this piece, I think that Sunday is by and large a more interesting and exciting day than Saturday. And so, do see who is available, and relationships which might on the surface seem rather boring might actually show a different side to their nature. And so don't underestimate other people, and other people may have an important contribution. Taurus, this weekend there is really quite a lot going on, and I'm not just talking to Taurus. I think that there is a lot going on for everyone. And as you move into the weekend, you have the moon in Virgo, moon in an Earth sign, and so with the moon in an Earth sign, that really gets things going. I think that you have the capacity to make things happen, and if you're focused and you concentrate on what matters, then I think that you can do things which really are of high standard, but which are completely integral to who you are. So you don't have to necessarily do things in other people's way. I think that you have your own ideas about the way things should be done, and you have to think about what feels authentic, and it's quite obvious really what feels authentic. You can try to do things another person's way. I mean, that's absolutely possible, but it's just going to feel not absolutely right. And so there may be a certain amount of trial and error. You do one thing, you do another thing, but if you try hard enough, I think you can actually find out what is working. Now, Venus, your ruler, is doing something quite interesting. You'll notice that Venus is at 10 degrees Virgo, and 10 degrees Virgo, that is a division. That is a division between the first decanate of Virgo and the second. So Venus is moving into the central decanate of Virgo, and this decanate is actually ruled by Venus. It's ruled by itself. And if you have been sort of watching, or what I've been saying about Venus and Virgo, you'll notice or you'll remember rather, that I had been a bit negative about Venus and Virgo. I'd said, oh well, Venus is in its fall. I mean, Venus is exalted in Pisces, therefore it's fallen in Virgo, and so that is not a great sign for Venus to be in. But it's not quite that straightforward. I mean, the reality is that Venus is in its own face, and I think in terms of Egyptian terms, I think it might also be in its own terms as well. So Venus is in a position where it actually has a lot of strength. So on the surface it seems perhaps weak in Virgo, but it's not. And with this sign change, with this decanate change, you just feel this extra strength. And so this weekend, I think that you feel more capable, and also I think that you get a sense of belonging. When you're talking about these essential dignities, so when I talk about an essential dignity, Venus, for example, is in its own sign in Taurus, it's in its own exaltation sign in Pisces. So these are dignities, and there are minor dignities like term and face and triplicity. So in fact, Venus is in its own triplicity as well. By day, not by night, because Venus rules the earth signs by day, but it's in its own triplicity. I think it's in its own face, and I think it's actually in its own term, in terms of the Egyptian terms. So yeah, you do feel at home right now, and so it's about thinking about what feels right, what feels good. You don't have to do anything that is alien. You're doing something because someone else wants you to do it. I mean, that's absolutely not what should be happening. And instead, just do what feels comfortable. And I don't think that you have to worry too much about what other people are saying and what other people are expecting. I think putting your own interest first, mildly. I say mildly because Venus is in the same sign as the South Node. You don't want to exaggerate. You don't want to completely ignore what other people want or other people's sensitivities. But I think that Taurus, you are sensitive enough right now, and so this says something about the whole weekend, and regardless of what sign the moon is in, and additionally you can be optimistic and positive, and really believe that you're on the right path, you're on the right track, that if you're given a chance, everything can go your way. Now, the moon does change signs, and the moon does move out of Virgo into Libra, and with the sign change, that might mean that you perhaps have to be a little more together, a little more organized as the moon moves into Libra. And with the moon moving into Libra, Libra is a very social sign, and there are social networks, there are perhaps demands upon you which, okay, you don't have to take them too seriously, but I think you have to just be more aware of the social environment, and also perhaps the material environment as well, because the moon, when it moves into Libra in the last part of the weekend, it does make a trine to Uranus, it makes a trine to Pluto, and you then have to think about what does that Uranus Pluto trine actually mean. This Uranus Pluto trine is, in some respects, the most important aspect of the weekend. I mean, it's quite high level. It's quite difficult to understand at a conscious level. But I think that you, Taurus, you may be trying to bring it down to earth. When that Grand Trine forms, when Moon is in Libra, trine Uranus, trine Pluto, Uranus trine Pluto, it's all coming together. And for some people, it's quite a spiritual energy. Well, perhaps for all of us, but you, Taurus, might try to interpret it in a slightly different way. You might see it as an impulse, perhaps, to be successful and to be free as well. And we might be thinking about something really very straightforward and very down to earth, like money and career, how you earn your money. Of course, you might not be working, you might not need to work, you might be looking for a job. It does kind of depend on your particular situation. But I think with this Uranus-Pluto trine, for all of us, this Uranus-Pluto trine is about freedom. But I think that you want your freedom in a particular way. Pluto moving through Aquarius, early Aquarius, does say something about your direction, you having a particular idea about where you want to go and how you want to develop things, and how you make your money. You don't want to be in the situation where, in order to bring in money, you have to compromise your independence and compromise your freedom of action, because Uranus and Pluto is about that freedom, and the moon kind of brings things together in this Grand Trine, and perhaps it's all about just changing the way you organize things. One thinks of organization as being something limiting. You have to do something. It's just a pain. You're being restricted. But the irony is that in order to be free, one sometimes has to be really very well organized, and so that might say something about the weekend, particularly the end of the weekend, and how you're dealing with the challenges of the new week. So this weekend, probably Saturday is sort of more interesting. Perhaps you feel that you have more freedom on Saturday, you don't have so much responsibility, but on Sunday I think you can do stuff which is pretty useful, and can allow you to align yourself with the future. Gemini, there is a Grand Trine this weekend, because you got Moon is moving into Libra. We've got Uranus in Gemini, Pluto in Aquarius. So this Grand Trine, and of course it's in air signs, and being in air signs, that can be really quite motivating and exciting and interesting. Just what Geminis want to hear. Yet Moon moving into Libra that doesn't really happen until Sunday, or maybe late on Saturday if you're, for example, in California. So it could then be that Saturday is potentially a bit of a grind. There may be moments over the weekend, over the course of Saturday, where it doesn't feel that things are necessarily coming together. You might be a bit sort of cautious on Saturday. There are things you have to sort of work through, and perhaps on Saturday, with the moon moving through Virgo, you're not necessarily feeling especially sociable, and you might feel that it's best to do things in your own way, at your own pace, and you're not necessarily going to be in the mood for taking any risks, or even doing anything exciting. That's kind of the way you want it to be, and it's quite possible, Gemini, that there really are things to do, things to organize. Maybe you're feeling that there is a vulnerability. Maybe there are a couple of vulnerabilities, and on Saturday you want to maybe address these vulnerabilities, hopefully in a way that is very concrete. And if you're trying to make yourself feel safer and secure, and less vulnerable to future shocks, maybe on Saturday there is something you can do about it, especially as the moon is applying to a sextile of the sun. In fact, the moon is making a sextile to Mercury. So in fact, that's how the weekend starts. And with the moon making a sextile to both the sun and Mercury, that can be about you really bringing things down to earth. And there could well be a financial side of things. You might find on Saturday that you can benefit from just looking at the books in a financial sense, making sure that you know how much money you've got in the bank. Sometimes it can be, if you've got a bank account, sometimes it can be terrifying, almost. For example, going onto the internet, looking at your bank's website, seeing how much money you've got, and you kind of don't want to know, and you see maybe it's less money than you expect, or there might be something that you need to look at, and there may be just areas that need some inspection. And as a Gemini, you'd kind of perhaps would prefer to be doing something else, but you can't really avoid it. So if there are any financial obligations, or you need to familiarize yourself with your own financial situation, then Saturday would be a good time to do it. And you might see the truth, but in a way, once you see the truth, once you understand the situation, then in a way it's going to make things easier. There's less uncertainty, and you can start to think, well, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do about it? And so that might be how Saturday works out. Even though on Saturday there is this exact Uranus-Pluto trine, I think that this Uranus-Pluto trine is probably not going to fully manifest until Sunday. And the reason is that that it is the moon moving into Libra, which activates everything. And so the moon moves into Libra. Well, it kind of depends where you are. That's sort of London time. The moon moves into Libra, I think, at 5:56 a.m. on Sunday, which is which is going to be just before 1 o'clock in the morning on Sunday if you're in New York, and sort of late on Saturday if you're in California. But when the moon does move into Libra, it just does make things more interesting, because straight away the moon is making this this grand trine, and it's really picking up on the fact that Uranus is in Gemini, Pluto in Aquarius. Of course, Uranus in Gemini, it's in your own sign, and this grand trine represents the power of the universe, at least the power of those outer planets. Uranus, Pluto, and to an extent Neptune, because when the moon moves into Libra, it is making an opposition to Neptune. So we've got this formation forming. We've got a grand trine which is not just a grand trine. It is it's a kite. So a kite is when you've got a grand trine, but when one of those planets makes an opposition. So the opposition is, if you like, the spine of the kite is that Moon Neptune opposition, and so it just might suddenly feel that things are moving, things are finally starting to flow, and that won't necessarily happen on a sort of a material level. It could be about your ideas. You're starting to be aware of what is possible. So when the moon moves out of Virgo and into Libra, you become more confident. You're not so cautious, and you start to be aware of what you could do if you were given the chance. And that's quite a common Gemini feeling, because Geminis can be very abstract. They think in theory about what they could do, and they can think about it quite a lot, and very often just nothing gets done, because Geminis can just think too much. They can have all sorts of ideas, and it just ends up being plain fantasy. Not because it is fantastic, but because they just find it really difficult to put theory into practice. But if you do have ideas developing this weekend, particularly on Sunday, as that grand trine starts to form, then you're certainly being aware of who you are, what your abilities are, and additionally how the environment is changing. So when we think about the environment changing, it's easy to be negative. We think that things are getting worse day by day. That's what we're being told, and that everything is just collapsing, and that's the idea. But maybe that's just negativity. It's just an interpretation, and if you're honest with yourself, Gemini, I think that you will recognize that there is a bridge between yourself and those changes in the outside world. They might seem like they're negative, but I think that at some level you can take advantage of them. And further, I think you even know you can take advantage of them, if you're just given the chance. So maybe this grand trine in air signs is presenting you with a possibility, and it's then up to you to decide what you're actually going to do with this possibility, and perhaps that is your challenge next week and beyond. Cancer. On Saturday, the moon continues to move through Virgo, and the moon is in mutual reception with Mercury. And in fact, the beginning of Saturday, the moon is making a sextile of Mercury, and then it moves on, and then the moon makes a sextile to the sun. So really, things are happening. Things can move, and like yesterday, Cancer, like Friday, I think that you're able to speak. You're able to talk about most things, and I mentioned yesterday that I thought you would be quite clever on Friday. I think your brain is on good form, and I think on Saturday, I think your brain continues to be on good form. So if you were doing something on Friday that was really working, or you felt happy with it, and you were really engaging with it, then as far as is possible, Cancer, I would advise you to carry on. You don't want to just put down tools just because it's the weekend, just because it's a Saturday. That might be a waste. So carry on with the process. Even if there's a change of scene. I don't know if you're working. Maybe you're working on a Friday, but you're not working on a Saturday. But even if there is a discontinuity there, that's just a material discontinuity. From an astrological point of view, there is continuity between Friday and Saturday, and it may be that on Saturday you can really see things through, certainly in your mind and in terms of planning, and perhaps there are particular conversations with other people and dynamics working through which you can really take advantage of. And don't forget just your intelligence. I think that your brain is going to continue to be on very good form, especially when the moon is making a sextile to the sun. This sextile to the sun does matter. The sun is still moving through your sign. Okay, it's getting towards the end of your sign. I mean, we've just think of 26, about 26 degrees Cancer at the beginning of Sunday. So you've only got 3.5 days before the sun moves into Leo. And so while the sun is in Cancer, while the moon is making a sextile to the sun on Saturday, that is a really good aspect. It allows you to really not just be yourself, but you can explain yourself very clearly. And I think that people will very much understand. Now, when the moon changes sign, which it does do, quite when it changes sign, it does depend on your time zone, but for most of us, by Sunday morning, the moon will be in Libra. Okay, if you're in Australia or if you're in Australasia, or parts of Asia, you might have to wait until sort of late afternoon, mid-afternoon on Sunday. But still, you get that sign change. So when that sign change happens, it maybe lowers the volume on things a little. It doesn't lower volume on everyone, but I think for Cancerians it might lower the volume, at least in an external sense. You perhaps want to just take a step back from things. You don't necessarily have to be in the middle of things, and with the moon moving through Libra, perhaps Cancerians are just going to want to calm down and do things their own way, and not feel any sense of obligation, and not feel they have to go anywhere, because you've got what you need. And the moon in Libra, it does make some quite sort of high level aspects. It's a grand trine after all. Moon in Libra, trine Uranus, trine Pluto, but this grand trine is, for you, Cancer, it's actually quite private. It's about things going on in your own world. And sure, there are a lot of realizations, and you might be thinking about things that you can't always verbalize. Yeah, I know that's a contradiction, thinking about things you can't verbalize. Of course, I'm looking at that from a Gemini perspective, and that's quite hard to imagine. But it does feel as if you're in touch with something, but it's just difficult to put a finger on what exactly is going on. And perhaps you shouldn't try to verbalize things. And with Moon, trine Uranus, trine Pluto, things are coming your way at quite a deep level, but it is in air signs, and so the words will eventually come together, and it just could be about an insight. And it's not unfortunate. I must make that clear, because the moon, when it does move into Libra, it does make a sextile to Jupiter. And so that really does help you out there, and you become privately aware that there are possibilities, that things are becoming available to you, and it might be possibilities that are exciting, that make your life more meaningful, but they can also be very down to earth. It just could be about a new way to perhaps earn more, have a better understanding of money, and remember, Jupiter is in Leo at the moment. It's just gone into Leo, and it's going to be in Leo for another year. And while Jupiter is in Leo for Cancerians, in theory at least, it is a time when the financial side of things should be focused on, because you can make more money. You can find ways of making more money. Okay, on the downside, you can find ways of spending more money, because Jupiter can exaggerate what it touches. But with Moon sextile Jupiter, in your own way, at your own pace, you can start to understand what is happening and what is available to you. And so it is down to earth, perhaps, in a way, but still, the Moon is in touch with Uranus and Pluto, and so your unconscious may be just telling you some interesting stuff. Not just interesting, but it might be allowing you to tune into what is going on. What is actually happening, and so do make the most of this, and you might sort of get insights, for example, about the collective. And if you're an entrepreneurial Cancerian, like Elon Musk, he's a Cancer. If you happen to be a trillionaire, or you used to be a trillionaire not so long ago, then you might get some insights about a new venture, even if you're not a trillionaire. Even if you've got no money, I think you just might get some insights about something you could do that could really work for you. So in general, Cancer, it looks like being a pretty reasonable weekend. Leo. The sun is now getting really late in Cancer. It's sort of midnight on Sunday. It's at 26.5 degrees Cancer. So there's only 3.5 degrees before it changes sign. Okay, if you're looking at it from a Western perspective, of course, from a Vedic perspective, the sun is going to be in Cancer for quite a long time. But these readings are by and large Western rather than Vedic. That's not to say that I don't sometimes use Vedic astrology. So from a Western perspective, the sun is getting ready to change sign. It will change sign sort of early next week, and when it changes signs, of course, that means it goes into Leo. It becomes very powerful. The sun will be in the sign of its rulership. So that is certainly something to be looking forward to. And it's more than that, because the sun is making a conjunction to Jupiter. And I think that is something that you can benefit from. But if we're talking about Sun and Jupiter, one thing that I perhaps forgotten to mention is that right now the Sun and Jupiter are in mixed reception. So if you look at what's going on, we've got the Sun is in Cancer, which is in the sign of Jupiter's exaltation. Jupiter is in Leo, which is the sign of the Sun's rulership. So there is a mixed reception between the Sun and Jupiter, mixed by it's by sign and exaltation, and so that really does give you a boost. I think sort of makes you probably luckier than average. Now, just because you're lucky doesn't mean to say good things are going to happen. If you are going through a lucky period, then you've got to be able to put yourself in a situation where you can actually take advantage of that luck. If you just do nothing and you just look at things as a sort of disinterested observer, then maybe nothing much will happen. But I think that the opportunity is very much available to you, and so I do think, Leo, that things are looking good. And of course, when the sun changes sign, that really does enhance your luck. And I think the Sun-Jupiter conjunction, all that is something I will be discussing in about a week's time when it becomes exact. So that's the general picture. Additionally, it's not just about luck; it's also about you feeling good about things. So there's no reason why you shouldn't feel good about things. You can see the possibilities, and the reason you can see the possibilities is because you're able to tune into the fire, which is fundamental to your sign. Leo is, of course, a fire sign, and the fire signs are about making connections, seeing how things link together, and there may be things which on the surface seem to be completely disconnected, and you don't know how to take advantage of them. It may be people, maybe talents, maybe events. There seems to be no connection between them on the surface, but then all of a sudden you realize how to bring things together, and I think that really does look good. And so if you're feeling good about the world, it's not just a fantasy. It's a world that really can work for you. And at the same time, like on Friday, I think that you're able to look good. And because you're able to look good, other people, I think, will respond to you very well. So if there's anything you need from other people, I think there's a good chance that you'll get it. And this general attractiveness should facilitate everything, including relationships. But there is a little bit of a difference between Saturday and Sunday. I mean, on Saturday, the moon is moving through Virgo, and it could be that Saturday is a day when you are a little more sort of down to earth than Sunday. On Saturday, we have a sextile between the sun and the moon, and this sun-moon sextile. I think it's very constructive, certainly constructive, and it allows you to concentrate on things that are important, money, sort of organisation, making sure that everything is properly sorted out. That's Moon in Virgo for you, and you don't have to make a big deal about it. You don't have to necessarily talk to other people about what you're doing. You might not want to be honest about your own attention to detail. Maybe it just doesn't seem cool. You might come over as being sort of a bit sort of petty-minded if you were to really tell people what you were concerned about. In which case, you can keep it to yourself, because it's not a time when you necessarily need to be open. You do things in your own way, and you get the job done, and that's enough. And then as you move into Sunday, well, the moon moves into Libra, and moon in Libra. Libra is a sign that, generally speaking, gets on pretty well with Leo. It's an air sign. There's no real conflict between Leo and Libra, and you're feeling quite good. I think that your ability to converse is going to be quite good, and of course, when the moon moves into Libra, it makes a trine to Uranus and it makes a trine to Pluto. And that might mean, Leo, that you can actually benefit, quite a lot from other people. Benefit certainly in an inspirational way. So, see who is available, see what people are doing, see what other people have got to offer. And relationships could take an interesting turn, at least in terms of your attitude to them. And you may, for example, recognize that someone has quite a lot of power, but it's not the kind of power that need work against you. I mean, although it could. I mean, you might have a perception that it could work against you. I mean, there is this opposition between Jupiter and Pluto forming. It's this Jupiter-Pluto opposition. It's not exact over the weekend, but it's pretty close. And Jupiter-Pluto opposition, is about wanting things to be better, wanting things to improve. And it might be that with this Jupiter-Pluto opposition that someone is challenging. And at first, you might regard this challenge as being threatening, because you're becoming aware of a truth that you don't kind of want to be aware of. But if you are able to enter into full awareness, you'll see that this is a challenge that is entirely constructive. And so that should be the kind of attitude, perhaps, that you have when socializing or involving yourself with particular people of importance to you. At least they might not seem important, but they could become important. And so every social interaction could leave its mark, and that mark, I think, will be beneficial provided you have the right attitude. And so, with Moon in Libra, as Sunday gets underway, just do see what's available. And if you run into a challenge, then you should regard that as being an opportunity, and you shouldn't get defensive about it. Virgo. On Saturday, we kind of have a continuation of Friday, because on Saturday we've got the moon just moving through your sign, moving through the last part of your sign, and the moon is in a pretty good position on Saturday. It's making a sextile to the sun. It's making a sextile to Mercury. Of course, Mercury is your ruler, and of course the moon and Mercury are in mutual reception with one another. So I'm thinking that on Saturday you're going to be on good form, and you should be on good form. I think that your mind will be really, really sparkling. Don't underestimate yourself. Okay, being a Virgo, you might think that your insights, sort of nothing special. It's all very obvious to you. But just because something is obvious doesn't mean it's not special. It doesn't mean that it's not outstanding. So if you have realizations on Saturday, don't just discard them. Don't think that everyone else is thinking the same way as you are. That's not necessarily the case. You may well be just ahead of the curve, and the reason you're ahead of the curve is not necessarily because you are being sort of super inspired, but just because you've just noticed things. You've noticed things that have passed other people by, and if you're the first one to notice something, it might not be completely original, but you perhaps have an advantage. And so, don't think that you're not unique, and really, really believe in yourself. And as far as your social life is concerned, if you are with other people on Saturday, I think that you can stand out, and it's not a time to be modest. Like, it's not a time to be arrogant either, but you've definitely got a contribution to make, and in your own way, you can be sort of quite dynamic. You can sort of pick up on the sort of the dynamism of the universe and the positivity of the universe. Sure, there's a lot of negativity flying around, but that's only because people are looking at things on sort of face value. But I think that you, Virgo, have just a better understanding of what is happening, and a better understanding of the opportunities. Now, Sunday is a somewhat different day, and that is because the moon is moving into Libra, and the moon, when it moves into Libra, is making a grand trine. This grand trine is a major theme of this video, and this grand trine connects with Uranus and Pluto. So on Saturday we have an exact Uranus-Pluto trine. But I'm thinking that on Sunday is the day when this Uranus-Pluto trine is going to be most available, because that's when the moon makes the trine to Uranus, trine to Pluto. But it's just the moon highlights Uranus and Pluto. It doesn't mean to say Uranus and Pluto are not going to be important when the moon moves on, or before the moon makes this grand trine. So it's certainly very energetic. But the question is, how are you likely to use Uranus and Pluto? And for you, it's probably a good idea to think about the Uranus. Uranus is in Gemini. I've mentioned Uranus in Gemini, what it means for you, quite a lot. And my message, which perhaps has become rather boring, is that Uranus is a time, Virgo, for you to really be outstanding, to really move towards original and unique goals and targets. And with this Uranus-Pluto trine, it might occur to you that things really are possible. They really can happen. But in order for them to happen, you might have to make a few changes. These are changes that you've kind of been thinking about for some time, maybe for the last few years, ever since Pluto went into Aquarius. And maybe you've got it together, maybe you haven't, but with this Uranus-Pluto trine, there may be just some urgency. You're thinking about what you could achieve, what you'd like to achieve, and you can see the gap. And if you're not getting to where you want to go fast enough, you might just realize that just something has to change. It may be that you've just been doing something day in, day out for years, and it was working up to a point, but now it just may not be working as well as it used to. And so now might be the time to think about how exactly you are going to make that change. Not everyone will be too happy about it, but you perhaps do need to think about yourself, and not in a way that is selfish, but things just can't go on forever. And with this Uranus-Pluto trine, you're starting to really think about what exactly needs to be done. And then the moon moving into Libra and making that grand trine, that allows you to very easily think about what you need to change, and also to think about the rewards. When I say rewards, maybe very simple. Rewards in terms of money, maybe. You make a change, that doesn't just allow you to move towards your targets, whatever those targets might be, but also it allows you to be able to benefit from it all financially. And I'm not saying that you're going to get that benefit immediately, but it's more like a promise. And so I think that this grand trine really can Virgo work for you, and I will be talking more about these energies because they're important for all of us, Virgos included. Libra, it's a weekend of a Grand Trine, and we've got Moon, Uranus, Pluto making this Grand Trine, and the Moon is moving into your sign. Okay, I make it that the Moon moves into Libra at 5:56 a.m. London time. Earlier, if you're in New York, that would be at just before 1 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. If you're in sort of California, that would be around 10 o'clock in the evening, or was that 9:56, something like that in the evening. So okay, it might be late on Saturday if you're in parts of the United States. Could be earlier on Sunday in Europe, Africa. Maybe later on Sunday if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But when the Moon moves into your sign, things really start moving. But in a way, they're already moving. One thing that's happening, at the beginning of a weekend is that Venus is changing decanate, and so you can divide each sign into 3 decanates, first, second, and third. And Venus was moving through the first 10 degrees of Virgo. But now it's moving into the central decanate of the sign, and the central decanate of Virgo is ruled by Venus. So Venus is in its own decanate, and Venus is already in its own triplicity by day, and I think that Venus is additionally, I think, in its own terms, the Egyptian terms, that's a way of providing, essential dignity. So I know that I've sort of mentioned, Venus is in Virgo, Venus is fallen in Virgo, but it's not quite as simple as that. Yeah, it might be fallen in Virgo. It gets some, if you like, subtractions from being in Virgo. I mean, William Lilly says that it gets -5 for being in Virgo, but right now it's getting, according to his point system, it's getting +1 for being in its decanate. It's getting +2 for being in another +2 for being in its term, so that would be +3 because William Lilly used the Chaldean terms, but I think really one should use the Egyptian terms. So and it's potentially getting a 3 for being in its triplicity. So Venus is not actually in such a bad position, and you may be feeling that in the weekend as you move into the weekend, just feeling that things are better, feeling more comfortable, feeling more at home. But still on Saturday, with the Moon moving through Virgo, you're not entirely feeling on great form, not immediately. You don't necessarily feel entirely, at one with the world. That doesn't mean to say there's nothing you can do. I mean, the Moon in Virgo is making sextiles between Mercury and the Sun, and as I've been saying to a few of the other signs, that with the Moon in Virgo, the Moon was in Virgo on Friday, and so I think you should see Saturday not as being the first day of the weekend, but you should perhaps see Saturday as being the first day of the weekend. Instead, you should see Saturday as being an extension to Friday. Friday and Saturday, at least astrologically, they're pretty similar days, and what perhaps started on Friday can be developed on Saturday. So if you have been working on something, including in your career, if you have a career, or in your job, not everyone has a job. Some people are retired. Some of you might be retired, or you're looking for a job, but it may not just be about jobs. It's just something that you're heading towards, something you're trying to focus on. Perhaps you were doing some work in that direction on on Friday. But yeah, try to see it through, particularly if you have a sense of unfinished business, if you felt that something was kind of stopped too early, maybe on Friday evening, try to see it through, whether that's through actual work or through preparation, through thinking, through planning. So that, I think, would be the best way of dealing with the energies on Saturday. And do be positive. I think you are quite positive at the moment, or at least you can be positive. If you really think about things and you think about how things are working out, yeah, sure, there's always a lot to be worried about for all of us, regardless of our sign. But your unique view does have a positive tinge, and I think this is not just about the way you think; it can actually be about what you say. And if you feel that the environment is a bit difficult, is a bit grim, then I think that there's something you can say to just lighten things up. And you can, I think, Libra, have a sort of a positive impact on other people, and you just have to just be open. It's a bit of a risk, maybe, being positive if other people appear to be negative, but the things you say, I think, really can make a big difference. And then we have the moon moving into Libra, and this this sort of takes place on Saturday. We can really kind of say, I know it's a bit of a generalization, that Sunday is a moon in Libra day, Saturday is a moon in Virgo day. And when the moon moves into Libra, it makes a grand trine. Moon making it trine to Uranus, trine to Pluto, and it's an air grand trine. So you, Libra, being an air sign, I think that you can really benefit from this. And when you talk about an air grand trine, things are moving, things are unfolding in a way that is just really very easy. And it just could be that you're in tune, you really are in tune with what's happening around you. You're able to link up with these high-level cosmic forces represented by Uranus and Pluto. You can see the possibilities, and additionally, you get a sense of your own purpose. It is available to you. You don't have to hold back anymore. And so I think that you can really pick up on the energy of this Uranus-Pluto trine. And of course, when you're talking about this Uranus-Pluto trine, as I said in the introduction to this video, this Uranus-Pluto trine, is about freedom. Perhaps feeling that we were being restricted, that events, maybe even people were holding us back. But now we can see the possibilities. We know that those chains which appeared to be restricting us, those chains are not so strong, are they? We can potentially escape from them, rather like the chains in, was it the tarot card, the Devil? It's always pointed out, isn't it, that those chains, what does the Devil look like? It's got, you've got the Devil, and then you've got these male and female figures chained to this concrete plinth on which the Devil is standing, and it's always pointed out that those chains are quite weak. We can break free if we want to, but it's just easier to sometimes to just stay where we are, to remain chained. So if you are worried about being restricted, maybe to a great extent it's in your mind. And if you really want to break free with this grand trine and do the things that you want to do, and break free into something different, something that goes beyond your everyday world, then I think that that's something you very much can do. And I think that you have the optimism, and the positivity to really be able to see it through. Now, I should say that as far as relationships are concerned, it might be a slightly different picture. I mean, the moon, okay, it's good that the moon is in Libra, but yeah, Neptune is in Aries, and the moon does make an opposition to Neptune. It also makes an opposition to Saturn in the end. Now, that moon-Saturn opposition is not until Monday, but the moon is going to be moving towards the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. And although I think it's a good weekend, I think it's particularly a good Sunday, it just could be that certain relationships could spoil things. It depends who you're dealing with, what the other person's track record is. But if people in the past had made things difficult for you, had perhaps restricted your freedom, or in particular, in fact, it happened, then maybe you should focus on other areas. Though it does depend on the situation, and the weekend ends with a sextile between Mars and Saturn, and with that sextile between Mars and Saturn, it's just possible that there's someone in your life who can give you some good advice, or they might provide some constructive criticism. And if that constructive criticism happens, take it on board. But it's got to be constructive. If you're just being criticised by someone just for the sake of it, well, you can just ignore that criticism. But so be wary of other people, but don't dismiss them out of hand. Scorpio. There is a lot of excitement about this Grand Trine in air signs. Maybe it's just me getting excited about this Grand Trine, and I certainly think that the Grand Trine is it's a very interesting aspect, and I think that all of us at some level are going to sort of pick up on it. But I'm not thinking, Scorpio, that it's necessarily a major event for you. I think that it's possible that your focus is going to be elsewhere, and instead, Scorpio, you just might notice what what other people are doing, maybe what other people are getting excited about, and you might not fully understand it, and you don't have to understand it. You can be accepting of it, and you can realize that other people have got things going on in their lives which they find to be interesting. But you can, if you like, be quite detached about it. And that's especially on Sunday. I think that probably for most Scorpios, Saturday is going to be more of an active day than Sunday. And on Saturday, the moon is moving through Virgo, and moon in Virgo, it's quite a sociable sign for you. And I think that on Saturday, I think that you'll be able to get on with people reasonably well. I mean, there is a sextile between the moon and not just Mercury but also the sun, and so moon sextile sun perhaps gives you the opportunity to interact with interesting people. You may get a different view, and so Scorpio, it's important not to be narrow-minded. Consider the possibility that there is potentially another way of doing things. You haven't got all the answers. I mean, some of your answers are pretty good, but just consider the possibility that there just might be another way of doing things, and be open to that possibility. But if you don't want to do anything this weekend, I think that's certainly an option. Though I think that there will be moments on Saturday and Sunday when you can certainly have an impact, and you might just see your chance. So, it could be, Scorpio, that, you're sort of a bit like one of these sort of, slow-moving snakes. I mean, the snake is, of course, a symbol of Scorpio, and, you might just want to be just in the background, and you're just watching, and you're just waiting for an opportunity, and that opportunity might arrive. You see that things are aligning, and when you see that moment of alignment, you may have the opportunity to really strike. You suddenly move out of hiding, you suddenly appear from nowhere, and you're going at lightning speed, and you can really do something dramatic which leaves everyone speechless. And you do it, and you are successful, and then you just go back into your the position pre-strike. So Scorpio, be aware. Use your sensitivity to be aware of what is going on around you, and when and if the opportunity arrives, then just be ready to act immediately and with great speed. And being a Scorpio, I think that you'll be able to evaluate the situation pretty well. But as you move into the weekend, as Moon moves out of Virgo and into Libra, I think that you just might feel that things are starting to sort of just settle down, and you can watch other people have their dramas, but I don't think that you're necessarily going to want to participate, although right at the end of a weekend there is a sextile between Mars and Saturn. So this Mars-Saturn sextile is an aspect that could well affect you, and I think probably affect you in quite a good way. I mean, it's a sextile after all, and Mars sextile Saturn. It is about discipline. It's about control, and there could be a time at the end of a weekend where you kind of thought that you weren't in control, that you weren't being taken particularly seriously, people weren't noticing you, and then you have this opportunity not just to strike in that sort of snake kind of way, but also to just have a more steady influence, to slowly, gradually make your influence felt. And if you want things done in a particular way, then I think that you will be taken increasingly seriously. And this sextile between Mars and Saturn should take you through into the beginning of a week. So by Monday, still you probably want to keep a fairly low profile, but at the same time you have a definite power, and a definite power to slow things down and to take control, because that's something that I think you're going to need to do, or at least want to do. If things are going too fast, there's too much talking, too much energy moving from one thing to another, it can be just difficult to work out what's going on. And so Scorpio, you can just perhaps indicate that you want things to slow down, you demand that things slow down, you demand that you're given some explanations, and if you do that, then I think that other people will conform. Okay, it might be that you appear to be spoiling the party, but maybe you've got a good reason to do so. I mean, okay, don't just spoil the party for the sake of it, but if you think that things need to be put under greater control, then I think you can definitely do something about it. Sagittarius. So on Saturday we've got the moon moving through Virgo. On Sunday we've got the moon moving through Libra, and that does mean that Saturday and Sunday could have different emphases. With the moon moving through Virgo, that's quite practical. I mean, the moon is in an Earth sign, and so with the moon in an Earth sign, you might feel that you are quite you're quite down to earth, and that's how you feel. You want things to be, you want things to be done properly. You want things to be straightforward. I mean, it's not very Sagittarian, is it? But it's Moon, Venus, South Node in Virgo. I mean, every now and then, Sagittarians, want some order. They feel that it's important, and I think that you can project yourself very well in a way that is consistent, and you make it clear that you need things to be done properly. And this might also relate to Friday, because on Friday, yesterday, the moon, or from a Saturday's perspective, is yesterday. So Friday, Saturday, moon is moving through Virgo through these 2 days, and it just may be that on Saturday you just want to see something through, and this might well be connected to your work, especially if you're working on Saturday, or if you've got something career orientated you're doing on Saturday, then you just keep going. Don't feel guilty about it. You don't have to stop what you're doing because it's a weekend. And even if you're not working, I think that there is opportunity to plan, to work out what you're going to do next. Saturday might be quite a good day for applying for jobs, contracts. You want something, you've got to ask for it, and because on Saturday, don't forget that Mercury is in mutual reception. Mercury is in mutual reception with the Moon in Virgo, Mercury in Cancer, and that gives you a real sense of what needs to be done, and you can really get to the bottom of things, and you can kind of get an idea about what people want to hear, and so Saturday might be a great time to be writing messages, even making phone calls, because you just know what needs to be said, and you shouldn't allow yourself to be distracted. It might seem that there are better things to be doing, more fun things to be doing, but Sagittarius, I think it is a time when you need to sort of get your priorities right, even if part of you feels quite distracted. I mean, I think there is a sense of distraction coming in, but as far as is possible, you should try not to be overwhelmed by it. Particularly on Saturday. Now, as Saturday becomes Sunday, things do change. The moon does move into Libra, and Libra is arguably a more fun sign from Virgo. And so Libra is just more easygoing, and I think that you can afford to be more tolerant of other people, and you can perhaps afford to be excited by them. I mean, Libra is a more fun sign, and the moon in Libra is making a trine to Uranus. It's also making a trine to Pluto, so that's why we've got a grand trine. And so Sunday there's more action. Things are easier, and you can perhaps benefit from other people in an exciting way, not in a material way, just enjoying people's company, and enjoying the fun side of their personality. I mean, but with a grand trine, it can also be quite inspiring, and you thinking about what it is that you would like to get off the ground, what you would like to do, and additionally, there may be moments when the distractions start to become stronger. I've suggested that maybe on Saturday there could be distractions, but somehow you're able to hopefully keep them at bay. But on Sunday, the distractions are becoming stronger, and you may find that you're not completely with it on a material level. You could sort of find yourself concentrating on something else, something quite far-flung, and you might not even feel that you're entirely there. You might want to sort of move to a new level, when you're not quite there in the material world. You want to kind of
reach to something, perhaps more spiritual. Especially as Jupiter is in Leo, which can be connected with the spiritual for you, Sagittarius, and things which just go beyond your immediate environment. And so, when the time is right, I think you can transcend to an extent. Depends who you are. Depends what kind of how much you value spirituality, but I think that is a possibility. But we can transcend in different ways, and transcendence is not just about spirituality. It's about just seeing everything at a new and sort of higher level. So that's the weekend, and the key thing is to make sure on Saturday you do everything that you need to do, and that you don't allow yourself to get too distracted.
Capricorn. It's a weekend where you might have to change gear halfway through. And that is because we do have a lunar sign change. So the weekend starts with the moon in Virgo, and it ends with the moon in Libra. And while the moon is in Virgo, it might be that you're almost in sort of an experimental mode. You're not necessarily committed to anything, and ideally, Capricorn, you want to think about one thing, think about another thing, try something out, and really be quite sort of open-minded. And it's certainly good to be open-minded, and you can perhaps be open-minded with the help of other people. One aspect we have, or two aspects we've got on Saturday. We've got the moon making a sextile to Mercury, moon making a sextile to the sun, and those two aspects, they're very constructive, and they perhaps allow you to explore with other people's help. And so it's a good idea to listen and to get alternative views about many different things. It might be about things that are quite practical. It could be about ideas, politics, religion. It's certainly not a time to be necessarily making sort of clear decisions. And so perhaps on Saturday you shouldn't necessarily have clear plans. I mean, I think there'll be a temptation to plan Saturday and to make Saturday really a very organized day. After all, the moon is in Virgo, but I don't think that that's necessarily the right approach. I think that if you can create different possibilities and be ready to change plans at short notice, and of course that's a good way of handling Mercury going retrograde. With Mercury retrograde, plans might just change very quickly, and I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. Mercury retrograde, gets a bad rap. People thinking that it's all a disaster, that everything just doesn't work. But when Mercury is retrograde, it's perhaps easier to make changes. Now, but as far as the change of gear is concerned, well, that happens when the moon moves into Libra, and moon moving into Libra is quite engaging, really. It is, and it's perhaps you thinking not anymore about different possibilities. It sort of makes you probably more single-minded. It's not just about the different things you could do, but perhaps the one thing you must do. And it's not just out of a sense of obligation, it's just a feeling that this is where you're going, and that you have a single direction, and you want to make it happen
as quickly as possible, and to be quite dynamic about it. And at the same time, when the moon moves into Libra, it makes trines to Uranus and trines to Pluto, and so you become aware of things which might have been restricting you in the past. Uranus Pluto as a pair are about freedom. They are about breaking free, but not breaking free, I think, in a crazy way. Break free, then it's sort of just complete chaos. It's not quite like that. When your dog breaks free, well, that's not something that's much fun. When you're running after it and it's going towards the traffic, it's not quite breaking. It's not breaking free in that chaotic, disorganized way. It's about recognizing what is possible and what that one thing actually is. And it may be that you even feel that there's a sort of a fated element to it, that you were supposed to be doing something, and there were all sorts of reasons in the past why you didn't do it, but now those reasons are starting to fall away, and it's now time to be shaking up your everyday routines. It's shaking up the supposed ties. There are many things that can tie you down. For example, money can tie you down. Now, I'm not advocating that you're irresponsible with money, but I think that you might start to see money in a slightly different way, and you might think, okay, if you can move towards a new source of income. I mean, that's a way in which this Uranus-Pluto trine could manifest. I mean, it is, because this weekend we do have a Uranus-Pluto trine, and for everyone, it's going to be important. And I just think for you, it just might it might be inviting you to look at what has been holding you back, what kind of attitudes about money and organization which might have been holding you back. And with this Grand Trine, I think that you're able to sort of really move forward. And I think that you're helped by a sextile between Mars and Saturn, which takes place late on Sunday. And I think that this Mars sextile Saturn on the surface seems a kind of a different energy. So, when you think about Mars-Saturn, you think about something really quite difficult and frustrating, but this is a sextile. And with this sextile Capricorn, I think that you really do have a chance to organize yourself and to make it clear, what it is that you want and what you don't want. And you can take something that might on the surface seem over top and crazy, and you can bring it down to earth and make it real, and really plan it and make sure that it stays a permanent part of your life, but a part of your life that is completely constructive. So many of the 12 signs are able to benefit from this Grand Trine in air, but you, Capricorn, because of this Mars sextile Saturn, you're able to perhaps utilize it in a way that some of the other signs just can't. Aquarius. You, Aquarius, are an air sign, obviously. And this weekend we have an Air Grand Trine. So we have got the moon moving into Libra on Sunday, maybe late on Saturday for in California, but it's sort of halfway through the weekend. We've got the moon moving into Libra. I think as a generalization, we could say that Saturday is more about moon in Virgo, Sunday is more about moon in Libra, and this Grand Trine really does have an impact on you, and I think it has a fortunate impact. I think you're quite pleased for the moon to be out of Virgo and into Libra, because while moon was in Virgo, It just might have been not perfect. You might have felt that you had to hold certain things back, and you were sort of maybe a little more intense than usual. I mean, it wasn't necessarily bad. I mean, the moon in Virgo on Saturday, it does make a sextile to the sun. So on Saturday, if you have for example, a serious approach to other people and to relationships, and you're not too light-hearted, and you're prepared to go with the complex details, perhaps the complex emotional details, with moon sextile sun. I think you can do it. So yeah, there is a seriousness to you on Saturday. I mean, we have got on Saturday also, Uranus Trine Pluto, but I don't think, even though Uranus Trine Pluto is exact on Saturday rather than Sunday, I don't think it's until Sunday that this Uranus Pluto really starts to manifest. And the key thing is the moon. The key thing is that when the moon moves out of Virgo into Libra, there's just suddenly sort of more action, more space, and you just start to get a sense of what is possible. And the moon allows the power of these two outer planets, Uranus and Pluto, to really start to develop. And Aquarius, deep down, there is the inner revolutionary. I mean, I'm not sure if Aquarians are quite as revolutionary as the textbooks say they are. If you actually look at some of the big revolutionaries historically, they're very often Taurans or Capricorns rather than Aquarians. But you still have a revolutionary spirit, and this Uranus-Pluto trine, does really pick up on it. And if you want to do things differently, I think you can, and I think you do want to do things differently. You are aware of the future, and you're aware of what that future means to you, and you have to do something in this future which is unique. You have a role to play, and it's not always easy to understand this role. But with the moon, when the moon moves into Libra, you have full access to that Uranus and Pluto, because we have this Air Grand Trine. Things really, really click together, and you can go beyond your immediate sphere and start to become aware of real possibilities, and at the same time have the organizational capacity to make it happen. And that's because on Sunday we've got a sextile between Mars and Saturn. And I think it's fairly late on Sunday. There's a sextile between Mars and Saturn. There's this sextile between Mars and Saturn. It's about Sunday. It's into Monday as well. And it's quite a disciplined aspect. Mars sextile Saturn. It's quite controlled, and you want to be in control. You want to be in control of your destiny, and you want to make things manageable. I mean, Aquarius is a fixed sign. With you being a fixed sign, you have things around you that may be moving very quickly, and you just want to make sure they don't go away, they don't go too far away. And so perhaps what you're trying to do at the end of the weekend is to almost catch the Grand Trine. So the Grand Trine is this sort of fast-moving energy which just does create many different possibilities, and you want to catch it. And I think you can catch it, and you can really utilize it to sort of align yourself with something new. And aside from that, don't forget that Jupiter and Pluto are moving towards an opposition of one another. This Jupiter-Pluto opposition is getting rather close. Jupiter is 4 degrees 7 Leo. It's Pluto 4 degrees 29 Aquarius, so they are less than half a degree apart. And this Jupiter-Pluto opposition is right across the main axis of your chart. Now, I'll be talking more about this Jupiter-Pluto opposition, but it might say something about relationships and expectations within relationships, wanting more and not being necessarily satisfied. Maybe it's you not being satisfied, maybe it's someone else not being satisfied, thinking that things could be taken further, or maybe thinking that some new relationship, some new connection might be necessary, might be required. Or Jupiter-Pluto opposition can be about a power struggle. You wanting things done in a particular way. Pluto in Aquarius, Jupiter in Leo in your opposite sign. That may say something about another person's ideas, their visions, what they would like to do. And so, do think about that Jupiter-Pluto opposition and think about how you are navigating some of the major relationships in your life. But I'll be talking more about this Jupiter-Pluto opposition, I think, in a few days' time. Pisces. So on Saturday, we've still got stuff in Virgo. We've got Moon in Virgo. We've got Venus, Pluto. Not Pluto in Virgo. Pluto was in Virgo in the 60s. We've got the Moon in Virgo. So we've got South Node, Venus, and the Moon in Virgo, which is your opposite sign. So in a way, that's kind of rather like yesterday, rather like Friday. So in terms of relationships, that might mean that there are just still things that are developing, and you're certainly aware that certain people have an influence on you, and you might find yourself having to adapt to whatever it is other people are doing, other people are wanting from you, maybe. And because the South Node is in Virgo, this is not necessarily very desirable. I mean, yes, there might be pressure, but it's pressure that should probably be resisted. Especially as you move into this weekend. I mean, when I made the thumbnail, if you'll notice in the thumbnail, I call it sort of break free. This is not a time to be constrained, and it's not a time to be constrained by anyone or anything or any situation. And so if you find at the beginning of a weekend that you are trying to be reasonable, you're trying to do what other people want, you're trying to make someone else happy, don't take it too far. And do think about what you want. The North Node is still in Pisces, and Pisces is, of course, your sign. So it should really be about you. As I was saying yesterday, I mean, what I've just said is, I'm afraid, is a bit of a repetition for what I said, from what I said on Friday. But that's because Friday and Saturday are quite similar days. Now, the Moon does change sign; it moves into Libra. And we have a Grand Trine in air signs. And this Grand Trine in air signs, there is this general principle of freedom for all of us, regardless of our sign. And as far as you're concerned, okay, I'm not saying that this Grand Trine is going to be massively important for you. I mean, at least in a relative sense. But I think that when the Moon moves out of Virgo into Libra, you're going to see things more in terms of yourself. I don't think that you're going to be, quite so influenced by what's happening around you. I think it's going to be sort of easier for you to say no. It's easier for you to say, well, you've got something else to do, and you're going to have to decline the invitation, decline the offer, whatever. And you're going to perhaps be, very aware of what is going on around you at quite a complicated level, and you can see how things maybe are quite complicated. Yeah, and Jupiter. Don't forget that Jupiter is now moving to that 4 degrees point. I mentioned that a lot of planets are on 4 degrees. Pluto is at 4 degrees Aquarius. Neptune is at 4 degrees Aries. Uranus is at 4 degrees Gemini. And now we have got Jupiter at 4 degrees Leo. So you are picking up on this outer planet configuration. In fact, if you want to get technical about it, you'll see that Jupiter is on the Uranus-Neptune midpoint. You can see here, there is Neptune, there is Uranus. So what planet is halfway between, what point is halfway between Uranus and Neptune? Well, you can see 4 degrees Taurus is halfway between Uranus and Neptune, and Jupiter is at 4 degrees Leo. So Jupiter is square the Uranus-Neptune midpoint, and so with Jupiter squaring the Uranus-Neptune midpoint, there just may be times where you can just feel that things are happening that you just don't fully understand, at least on a sort of a logical level. But fortunately, you're a Pisces, and you're able to work on a sort of a non-logical, maybe even non-rational level, although Jung would say that the water signs are rational. So you can perhaps tune into your feelings and just understand that something really is happening. Yeah, it's difficult to verbalize, but you just feel connected with things which go beyond the individual, and there'll just be moments where you can see things at a collective level when you're not just an individual, but you're perhaps a part of humanity, and that can be quite disorientating, but it almost gives you an idea and a sort of a vision, not quite a vision, but you just get a sense in some split second of something else, of some sort of sense of sort of cosmic unity, and it may just be very fleeting, but you're still able to pick up on something really very important. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to turn to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 38, which is opposition. And this hexagram is about perhaps being disconnected, feeling that we're dealing with things and perhaps people that are very different from ourselves. And if you look at the hexagram for opposition, the top 3 lines are fiery. These 3 lines, they can represent the sun, and the bottom 3 lines represent the lake, and so they're sort of watery, and so you've got sort of fire and water are involved in this hexagram, and the idea is that you're dealing with two things which just don't relate to one another, and this might be how we feel, that we are just disconnected with the world. And that might be about particular people. Maybe we've fallen out with them, or we've lost connections with them, or we just feel that we've got nothing to say, because everyone is talking at cross purposes. People have different priorities, and it's not about anyone being at fault. It's just the way things have been developing. Now, that does sound difficult, but we do have
a moving line. The fifth line moves. Now, usually in the I Ching, the fifth line is quite fortunate, and I think that this line it's okay. And what that fifth line is talking about is, for sure, two things being apart, maybe two people being apart, but it's kind of saying that that separation is not as strong as it looks. And the I Ching talks about a wrapping. Something is wrapped in such a way that it is obscured. We can't see the connection between ourselves and another situation, or another situation or another person. It's because it's obscured. And what the I Ching advises is to unwrap the thing, to look under the surface. And when we look under the surface, we see a connection which, to begin with, we just hadn't noticed. We'd assumed that we were disconnected. So what this means is we're not as disconnected as we think we are. And with this moving line, we move to a second hexagram. And the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 10, which is treading. And, this hexagram is about moving forward, but very, very carefully, because, of course, when you talk about treading, you're talking about tigers, and you're talking about tigers' tails. And what you mustn't do is tread on a tiger's tail, because if you tread on a tiger's tail, there's a risk it might bite you, and that would be a disaster. And so it seems that, to begin with, we feel disconnected. We feel that there's nothing we can do. We can't get on with people. The world out there just seems rather alien. But with that moving line, we realize that things aren't so bad, and we can start to step out into this world. This hexagram is about the feet, where we put our feet, even the kind of shoes we wear. And so we do tread carefully. And it might mean that we literally have to tread carefully. You don't want to stub your toe, for example. So you tread carefully. You start to make connections with things which, to begin with, you thought was impossible. And so maybe that's part of what this reading is about. It's saying that maybe there are people who you have fallen out with, or you feel you've got no connection with them. But by treading means you start to get in contact, you start to get in touch, and you have to be very delicate, you have to be very subtle. You don't rush into things, but if you are careful, if you do tread carefully, if you don't step on the tiger's tail, then the negativity of the previous hexagram opposition can be reversed, and we can find connections, and we can find in the end that we are part of something, and people will talk to us, we can talk to them, and we can find that we've got some common ground. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you have a great weekend, and of course I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again very soon.